Welcome back to our world, to the crowded rooms of the autumn of 1949. New appliances are crowding together in our kitchens. Television is bringing electronic visitors crowding into our living rooms, whether invited or not. Thousands of people, mostly veterans and their growing families, are crowding into identical little houses in Levittown, where pregnancy is referred to as the Levittown look. In September of '49, we learn that the Soviet Union has exploded its first atomic bomb. In the nuclear company, two's a crowd.
And it's getting harder to tell the good guys from the bad guys. The story of one man says it best. He was American, born poor, worked his way through school, all-American in football. He was a lawyer, an actor who played Shakespeare in London, a singer whose voice was known throughout our world. He was, we said, a credit to his race. Too bad we didn't mean the human race. We said we believed in equality for people whose skin was a different shade, people whose eyes were differently made. We fought wars over it, and now stood in line to see a musical about it, South Pacific. But some principles are easier to fight for and sing about than to live up to. All across a crowded world, we meet ourselves on this issue.
Northwest Airlines Hawaiian Express.
South Pacific. You could get there by plane.
The islands of Hawaii are just overnight from home.
Warm enchanted evening, you may see a strange shore.
South Pacific. You could go there on Broadway.
And somehow you know.
And you could hear it anywhere, even in the South Pacific.
That somewhere you'll see her again and again. Some enchanted evening.
One voice stood out from the crowd. It belonged to a man who refused to change his tune to fit popular opinion. He said America wasn't free for blacks. He said Russians weren't slaves for Stalin. His name was Paul Robeson. He was American, the son of a slave, and he was free. Pete Seeger knew about Robeson, and he knew about America's Achilles heel.
Other people had touched it, but never been quite so frank about it.
How could our black turn on us, is what they said.
Was he a communist? He said no. Paul Robeson Jr., his son, said he was a patriot.
He wasn't willing to go with the prevailing winds. And by the way, just a few years before and during the war, communists were quite respectable.
But the wind had shifted. Across the land, a storm was brewing over communism. It would touch down in Peekskill, New York, at a Robeson concert. George Davis, one of the veterans who didn't like Robeson's politics and did live in Peekskill.
There was a lot of animosity there. These veterans says, you know, what are they trying to do to us? We helped win that war.
900 police, the largest concentration ever to guard the area around Peekskill, New York, converged to prevent a battle between war veterans and followers of Paul Robeson. The Negro baritone draws plenty of enthusiasm from the communistic faith. But on the other side are many more who believe in free democracy, and they spare no pains to show their disapproval of the red element. Cheers and catcalls greet the incoming commie contingent.
And what the police did is they made the buses park across the road. They wouldn't let them go down into the picnic ground, so that blacks getting out of the buses had to run the gauntlet of rocks, blows, and occasionally police clubs to get in. As they were about to start the concert, the head of the security asked him, "Are you sure you want to sing? Because our guards have flushed out 2 snipers' nests on the hill overlooking where you're going to sing, overlooking the platform under a big oak tree." And he said, "No, there are thousands of people here. I'll sing." They asked for volunteers to stand physically on the platform, big guys, between my father and the hill, so if there was a bullet, their bodies would take it. Men, the majority of whom happened to be white, just about came to blows over who was going to have this privilege. Finally, they had to draw straws. It was a lesson for me, let's say, in race relations. Here are white men about to come to blows to risk their lives for a black man who was my father. Those are the kind of lessons you always remember.
All of a sudden, there was a quiet that laid over the field. You couldn't hear the helicopter. You couldn't hear too much. And all you could hear coming from a microphone down in that field, maybe it was Howard Fast, he said, "The real Americans are down here in this field today listening to this concert." It came over very clear, not like that trash that's up on the road. Well, that more or less started things going because you had a bunch of hard-nosed combat veterans that was up there and referred to as trash.
When the music was all over, we started to go home. We did not know the trouble and the pain that was to come.
Situation has gotten very tense,
And the cries from the mob outside were interesting. They went like Jews, commies, niggers, in various order, interchangeably. You got in, but you'll never get out alive.
Everybody seemed to clash. Everybody seemed to clash.
Around the corner was a guy with a pile of stones about waist high, and every car that came by, wham, at close range into that car.
This black man who was on the ground fairly badly beaten, and a GI in uniform, white GI, grabbed his arm and said, "Hey, no, that's not Robeson. That's not him." And the undying quote of this GI was, "No, that's not the American way. You don't lynch the wrong nigger." But it saved the guy's life.
Hold the line, yes, hold the line. As we held the line at Peekskill, we will hold it everywhere. We will hold the line forever till there's freedom everywhere.
You and me, we sweat and strain.
Seeger wrote the song about Peekskill 3 weeks after Peekskill. Robeson, he still sang about the river, but the words were forever changed.
You show a little grit and you land in jail. But I keeps laughing instead of crying. I must keep fighting until I'm dying, and old man River, he'll just keep rolling along.
Come back to the fall of 1949, when China fell to the communists, or as Mao Zedong put it, when China stood up.
Our world will continue with a crowded room in the fall of '49.
We owe it to you, so we invite GM and Ford to follow Chrysler. You know, for 5 years, I've been feeling like the guy who sent invitations to a party, and nobody came. Well, somebody finally showed up. GM and Ford decided the time has come to improve their warranties. Chrysler says, welcome to the party. It's good for America. Maybe that's why we haven't heard from the Japanese. Millions of Americans are only getting 2 or 3 year protection. What are they, second-class citizens? We've backed 5 million Chrysler owners with 550 protection. Our quality had to improve, and dramatically. So, the party's over. Chrysler announces the end of 550 and the beginning of 770, the best powertrain protection in the business. 7 years or 70,000 miles on the powertrain, 100,000 miles against outer body rust through on every Chrysler, Dodge, and Plymouth we build, car, truck, and minivan. Like I said, if you're looking for who builds them best, take a good look at who backs them best.
Once there was a fella who just didn't have what it takes to win his Valentine. Then he remembered Baskin-Robbins ice cream cakes. They're specially made for Valentine's Day in our most lovable flavors. Now, thanks to Baskin-Robbins, he found the way to melt her heart.
I need a carpet deodorizer that destroys odors without heavy perfume. So I use Arm & Hammer carpet deodorizer.
Other products cover up odors. Arm & Hammer penetrates to absorb and destroy odors.
Smells clean and fresh without heavy perfume.
A motion picture called America. A fable of tyranny. A lesson in liberty. a testament to the best in all peoples, all nations. Starting Sunday, decide for yourself about America.
Welcome back to the fall of 1949. The Yankees beat the Dodgers in the World Series that season, and the pennant races in both leagues went down to the very last day. And on that day, the editors of the august New York Times gave baseball precedence over the establishment of the People's Republic of China. Well, why not? The pennant races were still in doubt. The victory of the communists in China had been a foregone conclusion all year, ever since January, when the nationalists lost more than 500,000 men in one battle. On October 1st, in Peking's Tiananmen Square, hundreds of thousands of Chinese attended ceremonies for the birth of a nation, the People's Republic of China, Communist China, Red China, now a fact of life after a successful civil war against the Kuomintang, or nationalist government of Chiang Kai-shek.
The Army parade came in for hours, artillery, heavy tanks. You'd think the American Army was marching in.
American-born Dr. George Hatem, who had been with the communists for 13 years, was there that day.
Mao said China now has stood up. That's a very strong statement. And he also said that from now on, China is liberated.
In 1946, Chiang Kai-shek, armed with more than 20 American-equipped divisions, had set out to rid China of the communists once and for all. After some initial success, the tide turned. The poorly armed guerrillas swarmed out of their strongholds in northern China, overrunning the Kuomintang troops. General Claire Chennault, one American who had stayed in China since World War II, tried to help. His widow, Anna Chennault.
My husband, General Chennault, was operating the airline. We were trying to move people out. People were talking about maybe they would divide the country, that the communists would take the north and the Kuomintang would take the south, but that never did come about.
U.S. diplomat John Melby watched the nationalists collapse.
It was a whole civilization, a 2,000-year-old civilization just crumbling, collapsing. Everything in disorganization. China, in effect, had come to a halt. Ahead of the communist armies, as they moved slowly south, came the hordes of refugees. And I don't care who they are or where they are, all refugees look alike. They're all cold, sick, hungry, despairing. They don't know what they're doing, where they're going. They're just moving, crawling, slowly.
One of the last Americans to leave Peking was another State Department employee, Howard Sollenberger, who filmed these scenes with his home movie camera. Life was rarely this pleasant.
Money was worthless. Inflation that is hard for us to believe. When my wife had her 30th birthday, and I gave her $1 million for her 30th birthday, well, this cost me about 40 US dollars to buy 1 million Chinese dollars. This was the exchange. We were preparing ourselves for a siege. We didn't know how long it would last. There had been a few American planes, military attaché planes, that came into Peking towards the end. And one of the things I remember quite distinctly is the last plane that came in. The plane landed in the city on the old polo grounds with the city wall in the background and the tower on the city wall. The last chance we had to get mail out to our relatives, people outside. A cloud of dust, of course, rising as the plane took off, and that was it.
You almost had to live there to know how corrupt a society could become. And of course, this is, in a sense, one thing that led to the charge of so many Foreign Service officers who said, we're pro-communist. Well, they weren't in that sense, no. But most of them had been in North China. They'd seen the communists in operation. They knew that they were a dedicated group, that they were absolutely incorruptible, that they believed in something. And the contrast with the Kuomintang was just so appalling
that everybody had to say, well, this is the future of China.
And now, after centuries of emperors and warlords, Western domination, and Japanese occupation, it was the communists under Mao Zedong who would try to govern 1/4 of the human race. Their first few minutes were rocky.
All the microphones on the rostrum were live. We were not used to these things. Our leadership wasn't. And they were conversing among themselves and joking and laughing and so forth. And everybody was laughing below because they weren't supposed to hear all this. They weren't meant to.
Han Shu, a minor communist functionary at the time, had a big job to do that day.
On the afternoon of the October 1st, I was given a very important task and to send copies of the proclamation of the founding of People's Republic of China to the Consulate General of United States. So we just told the then U.S. government that the People's Republic was founded and only asked for a recognition.
There was a kind of assumption, beginning with the Secretary of State, Dean Acheson, that indeed we were going to recognize, assuming that there was established a legal, legitimate government, that it was in full control, and that it was maintaining peace and order in China.
But powerful forces in this country were outraged at what they considered a betrayal of the nationalists. Their most influential voice on the Senate floor was the late William Noland of California.
May God grant there is time to rectify, in part at least, the Asiatic debacle now in the making, even while we meet here today. Mr. President, it is a fallacy to believe that there is any basis at this time or in the immediate future for the recognition of the communist regime in China. They have had no free elections. They have an absolute dictatorship. It is a government which has been established by force of arms over a part of China. I have no doubt that all the communist forces throughout the world are tied together in a master plan. It makes very little difference whether they be Czechoslovakian communists, Polish communists, or communists from Soviet Russia or China. I think they are all working toward the overthrow of what we like to think of as a free world of free men.
The Chinese communists did not go away nor change their dictatorial tune. Full diplomatic recognition from Washington took nearly 3 decades.
Mao Zedong wrote that politics is war without bloodshed, while war is politics with bloodshed. He'd had the one, now he would have the other. The sayings of Chairman Mao would be recorded in this, Mao's Little Red Book. By the end of autumn 1949, our world seemed to be colored not a little, but a lot red. Come back to that legacy of that crowded room and the strangers we met there.
Our World continues. A crowded room in the fall of '49.
The most punishing road in Europe is not the Appian Way in Italy. You will not find it in a remote section of the Tyrolean Alps, or even some medieval village. Mercedes-Benz engineers would say they've built it here, in Sindelfingen, West Germany. A test of strength more brutal than any road, punishing the car for weeks on end, because in their quest for durability, Mercedes-Benz engineers just don't know when to stop.
Why do we make Future shine with tough acrylic? Because we know what your floor goes through in a day. Future with clear acrylic, the tough shine for your high-traffic floor.
If you're looking for a simple way to apply for the American Express card, simply pick up one of these, because now you can apply over the phone. Just call 1-800-THE-CARD.
When you sleep with someone, you're sleeping with everyone they've slept with. As AIDS spreads, safe sex could save your life.
Watch 2020.
Tonight. Welcome back to the Whatever Happened To part of the autumn of 1949. A freedom rider in Alabama, or a victim of the Cultural Revolution in China, will tell you, truthfully, that race relations in this country and political oppression in China would get worse before they got better. But they did get better. Some of the things from the fall of '49 just got bigger.
The sky is no longer bright canary yellow only because nuclear bombs are tested underground. And 5 countries have nuclear bombs now, including China, which the United States finally recognized in 1979. Open communication between the 2 countries has resulted in an exchange of goods and, it would seem, an exchange of ideas. In the winter of 1987, we watched on television as communist Chinese students took to the street to demand, as they put it, more democracy.
Good evening. I'm Ted Koppel, and this is Nightline.
Yes, television spread across a crowded world, but now it's usually the news that's live and not make-believe drama.
You've become the first Middle East terrorist.
Direct hit on faceplate. Turret
Studio 1 went away.
Killed in turret chamber.
That's not true. Well, of course it's true.
But Charlton Heston came back.
To him, you have no right to give him that information.
Stay put for 10 minutes and see for yourself.
Runaway cars that have shot forward or backward very fast.
Betty Furness stayed put, outlasted any product she ever pitched, and now compares products on television news.
For this year have been an Audi 5000.
Because all those babies that were booming in 1949 are buying in 1987. They don't like being called yuppies. It implies they're all as alike as the suburbs so many of them grew up in. But look. The matched set of little boxes that was Levittown in 1949 is, in 1987, an unmatched set of bigger boxes. Towns change when people change them. For example, in Peekskill, New York, you never hear talk about stoning the niggers anymore. After all, you don't throw rocks at the mayor.
There's an old man called the Mississippi.
Paul Robeson is dead, his song is ended, neither his melody nor his memory have lingered on. Robeson is a story that has been lost in the crowd.
Got troubles, what does he care if the land ain't free?
Well, there it is, the way it was for a couple of months in the fall of 1949. When the Soviets got the atomic bomb, a manual sponsored by the U.S. government called How to Survive an Atomic Bomb advised men to wear wide-brimmed hats, gave some protection against the heat flash, the manual said. Radioactive fallout, we were told, was much the same as sunlight. Too much could kill you, but moderate exposure was just another hazard of contemporary life. Of course, that was before the A-bomb became the H-bomb, before fission became fusion, before this country and the Soviets began to think seriously about limiting, if not eliminating, nuclear weapons. Not much has been done about that, but at least nowadays you don't hear a lot about wide-brimmed hats.
Milton Berle had the most popular show on TV. It aired Tuesday nights at 8 o'clock on NBC. Perhaps CBS figured it might as well concede the hour, as far as ratings were concerned, and use the time instead to try something new and different and maybe even, you know, enlightening. Who knows how these decisions get made in television? In any case, CBS chose to broadcast an all-black variety show opposite Berle. The all-black variety show went on the air on September 13th and off on October 20th. Now Bill Cosby stands where Milton Berle stood. As for our world, it may or may not be enlightening, but it's February, and we're still here, and so it goes, or so one hopes.
These things also happened in the fall of 1949.
11 leaders of the Communist Party of the United States were sentenced to up to 5 years in prison for conspiring to advocate the violent overthrow of the government.
The Great Lakes cruise ship Noronic burned at its dock in Toronto. 132 people died.
Colonel Matt Gwynn, promoter of the Kentucky Derby, died at 88. In the 47 years that he ran Churchill Downs, Gwynn said that he never owned a horse, placed a bet, or took a drink before noon.
In Cleveland, Charlie LaPica, who said he would sit on a flagpole until the Indians went into first place, came down after 177 days. The Indians never made first place.
Jackie Robinson was voted most valuable player in the National League.
Our world film editor, Florence Minor, was born on October 22nd.
For the Our World Viewer Guide, write to Community Relations, ABC, 1330 Avenue of the Americas, New York, New York, 10019.
For a transcript of this broadcast, send $3 to Our World Transcripts to John Street, New York, New York, 10038.
Mount Everest, the ultimate climbing challenge. Follow a dramatic expedition to put the first American woman on the summit, plus the daring first ever hang gliding attempt from the mountain. It's the premiere of Mutual of Omaha's Spirit of Adventure on ABC Sports, Sunday.
An ABC News business brief. Now from New York, Dan Courts.
Good evening. 3 Wall Street executives, 2 with Kidder Peabody and 1 with Goldman Sachs, were charged with making millions by illegally swapping inside information. American Home Products dropped its bid for A.H. Robbins, sending Robbins stock into a tailspin. A Texas appeals court upheld most of a $10.5 billion jury award to Pennzoil in its case against Texaco. Retail sales fell sharply last month because of plunging car sales,